Hey, welcome, Elisabeth. I'm glad to have you with me today.
Hi, good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I mean, my pleasure. And first of all, I want to thank French Founders for the opportunity. They connected us. I think it's a really great opportunity to talk about revenue operations today with you. I mean, you're going to introduce yourself, but you have a really good expertise on the field. Before deep diving, just a quick intro on Captain Data. I'm G, co-founder and CEO. What we do with Captain Data is data automation operations at scale. And of course, revenue operations is very interesting for us. And today you're here with us to talk about, well, the recent trend. I mean, RevOps is fairly new. And we are also going to take a deep look at how you actually started with RevOps. So first, I know you started with PwC, then done so much things in sales, go to market and stuff. Can you intro yourself?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I'll try to do the short version, right? Actually, French born and raised, and I guess that's how we got connected, right? Through French founders. Been in the US 18 years, started at PwC. I really quickly served very big tech and financial services client on everything go to market. So whether marketing ops, sales ops, channel ops also, anything related to partners, and then service ops was part of my preview. I picked up technology and salesforce.com back in 2008, started the US Salesforce practice for PwC US, which was my first taste of starting a business and working with startups. So that was really, really fun. But then in 2017, I exited, didn't go very far. I was in the Bay Area. And then since then, for the last 6 years, I've had different go-to-market operator roles at different startups. B2B SaaS, that's my big focus. Late stage to very early stage. Right now I'm helping a company pre-product, pre-revenue, but I've done the 300 million and getting ready to IPO. And again, had those different operating roles were pre-sale, post-sales, you name it. So hopefully I can answer a lot of your questions, and we can debate. And I think we had talked, in the prep, maybe we're going to be a bit, unconventional and a
Yeah.
bit disruptive. Let's see if we get there.
Definitely. I mean, this is going to be one of the question that I'm going to ask. Maybe before this, what I would like us to cover is what has changed in the past 5 years. Because, I mean, again, RevOps is fairly new. How does someone like you end up doing what you do today? With the market that has changed, with the jobs that are also changing. I think it's also important. Because again, you went from sales to go to market to so many things. How do you end up working in RevOps in the end?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I think, it's funny when you say RevOps is new. Yes, RevOps is a new term. I don't think revenue operation is in its core completely new, right? I think
Yep.
some of us have done marketing ops or sales ops. We were in silos, sorry. And so I think now it's been brought together, and realizing that we're looking at this as a life cycle, right? And how do we support revenue of any kind, right? For the companies. So I would say that the big things that have changed in the last 5 years is more the terminology, and how I think some of those very experienced to more junior resources are now learning the full life cycle versus being slotted into one of the different functions. In terms of how I got here, aerospace background, never thought I was going to end up in consulting or business, right? I was like, oh, I'm going to go work for Airbus and
Yeah, I guess.
Boeing, right? And then you get into consulting, and for me, I was doing integration M&A when I first started at PwC. I was not even in go to market operations, but they always pulled me into that what I call front facing functions, right? Serving the customers in one fashion or the other, and I really enjoyed it. I didn't want to become that Uber PM, just doing project management. Okay, how do I bring sales teams together when they get acquired, and we combine companies? I really wanted to learn more on the functional side. So I took a risk. I just said, I raised my hand. I said, I want to switch practices. I want to get really in customer strategy and operations, which was a brand new practice at the time for PwC. I just got in and really started learning from my peers, some of my more senior partners and directors, and then working really big clients. And I really enjoyed it. I have to admit, I'm a bit of a geek, and it's almost, I have a revenue ops leader at home too. So you can just imagine how we're geeking out on all of this at home, which is not a good thing or a good thing. I don't know. But it's just that learning, and then continuing to do that for a very big client, even switching to financial services and trying to bring the best practices from tech into financial services was quite interesting. And then after that, just exiting and continuing doing that in different fashions in the startup world, well, then brings a complete different set of challenges. So that's really how I got here. Again, plenty of bumps and different, turns along the way, but that's the main journey. Yeah.
So you mentioned customer facing, which I think is really interesting and really important, because you mentioned when we talked about it that we have to view it as the full funnel, and I totally agree with you. And I think this is something that kind of tickles you in a way. You mentioned going unconventional, because I think that what you see on the market regarding revenue operations is not really a true, let's say, RevOps implementation in a way, in so many ways.
Yeah, I know we talked about that a bit earlier, a few weeks back. I think you can't, people think about revenue operations. Obviously, there's a big ops component to it, but I think, and I was thinking about that last night prepping for this, and, I've been just helping a startup right now, and I approached revenue ops from the customer journey. So that's number one. I think, as you look at all the touch points, and some of them, with customers are not revenue related, right? It's especially early stage, it's marketing, it's awareness, hopefully it will drive to generating revenue. I really think that RevOps, if you look at it, should completely be tied with the customer journey from end to finish, right? I think that's where you can really build the best customer experience and the operations that you need to generate that revenue and manage that revenue, with obviously some offshoots of other things you need to provide anyway to a sales team, to a PS team, to a customer success team. And what I'm saying, that what I'm referring to here is enablement and comp, some of the other things that are not customer facing, but you need to do to really support that customer journey in a way, right? You can't just omit those pieces. And I think that's how I would prefer looking at it, to be very honest. Like, it's almost like customer journey operations or customer operations, right? Where it's all about trying to stay customer centric and how you build all the blocks to support that. I think, to your point, and I think we might become a bit controversial there, is, what are we seeing out there, and who's really a revenue ops leader or analyst, or, it's funny because you go, and I think we talked about it, there's a bunch of community popping up around LinkedIn and the globe of revenue ops, communities, right? Hey, bring all those revenue ops professionals. And as you look at those, and I've joined some of them myself, you look at people and their profile, and it's a lot of people that have had really deep marketing ops or very deep sales ops or customer ops, PS ops, but not a lot of them have had the chance or the opportunity to kind of work and support all of those functions together. But everybody's claiming I'm a RevOps professional, right? So it's kind of interesting. And I think hopefully it's going to develop. I think those community are really great to kind of bring people together. They answer a lot of questions that allows people to raise their hand and provide knowledge and all that. But I think it's going to have to mature to get to really what I think is RevOps, which is the ability to support that entire customer journey and say, yes, I know how to manage revenue in sales, but I also know how to manage revenue in CS or PS, which is totally different, right? From an onboarding and services perspective. So.
Yeah, totally. And I think maybe if we continue in the same direction, you mentioned that you were actually doing this with, I think, a seed startup. If we take the range from pre-seed to Series A in terms of best practices, for you, what are the key success factors when you look at implementation? Because we all know that, okay, there is operations in the world, in the world RevOps, fine, but it's also about people, it's about process, it's also about data. How do you think about it? I mean, you mentioned the customer journey, okay, fine, but then you mentioned that the people have kind of the RevOps title, but it's not entirely exactly what they're doing. So how is it going to be working for a small company at the early stage?
I think actually, being a RevOps professional at a younger company is where you really get the opportunity to build everything, right? Versus a bigger
Yeah,
company
you don't
in
have
the
the choice.
silos, right? You don't have, yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah.
So in terms of, from seed to Series A, the way I'm really looking at it is, just again, taking the customer journey and the main touch point and prioritizing, right? To your point, you don't need everything from day one, especially as seed. You don't have the people, you don't have the money. So it's really identifying the minimum viable product, right? From marketing to customer success and building that process, as well as the tools that you need and obviously the data, right? I think the big mistake is twofold for me and what I've seen so far. Again, there's plenty of other ones. Is one, people forego thinking about that end-to-end process and saying, at the end of the day, I need to know where my revenue is coming from and managing it. I think people have a tendency to just say, okay, I'll do spreadsheets or I'll do OneNote and just just completely say, it could be because they don't know how to do it, because they don't have the people. It could be different reasons, right? I'm not saying, but we're so focused on product selling, right? And then our products, like features and continuously releasing, that we forget that, hey, at the end of the day, investors still want to know what's my pipe and, how many customers I have and what's the health of our customers, right? Those three things. So I think that's number one, is really don't over engineer it, right? Don't try to be like the Adobes of the world and public companies, but at least think through, how do you want to manage your pipe, and then how do you want to manage your customer? That's really what it is, and what kind of basic data. At seed, right? Pre-seed, seed. As you grow to Series A, you're going to you're onboarding more people anyway, right? In those functions, whether sales, you might be now having a smaller sales team, a handful of people. It's not just you as a co-founder or just, going at it and trying to find that. So you start having maybe a sales lead, and a couple of people. Yeah. You start focusing on marketing. And so at that point, you need to really focus on that collaboration. So you might have built that MVP, right? Like the foundation that's going to be able to give you visibility, crunch a bit of the numbers. But how do you now build on top of that and starts really helping those teams collaborate? Because that's the biggest pitfall, right? I think we've all seen that. Everybody stays siloed. Marketing is like, this is my responsibility. Sales like, no, this is my responsibility. Where's my pipeline? Are you doing dimension? So how do you break that? And I think that's should be one of the mandate of RevOps, which is the facilitator of breaking all those silos and making sure, that revenue flows very, very well through the process. And it's funny because we were just talking about that with my husband this morning.
Excellent.
Just at a later stage startup. So they're closer to, I think, Series D, but anyway, and he's coming in fresh and he's doing his, first 30 days, listen what's going on. And he's like, oh, there is, we gotta rebuild, right? It's going to be a rebuild project. And he's seeing already the tension between the different leaders around the revenue. And I'm like, that's your job. You're the mediator. You got to go and make sure to calm everybody down. And how do you help those leaders work together? Because at the end of the day, their goal is to grow revenue and then go to IPO possibly, right? So it's like, this is what RevOps is all about. Get everybody at the table and stop those battles, right?
Which actually makes me think in a way that, and I want your input on this. Do you think it has something to do with the fact that we see more and more sustainable growth in companies? Like at some point, if we talk about maybe 5 to 10 years ago, we just were looking for hyper growth, numbers, big numbers, but maybe not revenue. And at the moment, what everybody is looking at, especially VCs, for example, it's revenue, what's your EBITDA and stuff like this. Do you think it has a strong impact?
I do think so. I think we're at a turning point because of the market, right? And their economical circumstances for operations in general, but revenue ops especially, to be a value creator, right? I think you hit it on the head, right? I think even until early last year, everybody was focused on hypergrowth, right? The valuations were extremely high, right? People were getting pretty much white powder for cheap, right? Yeah. And so, the VCs were not focused on that. It was just grow as fast as you can, and then let's exit, right? I think now with what's going on and cash is tight, people are a bit, more careful. The valuations went down. this is when ops becomes the value creator, right? I think it's the perfect time to do that. And so I think that's, to your point, I think that's why RevOps is picking up. It's, if you look at three of the big pillar, at least of a B2B SaaS startup, it is revenue ops, what I call business ops, which is think about legal, finance, HR, I don't want to call them backend, but non-revenue facing, and then product and engineering ops, right? These are really the three pillars, and you can add corp dev on top, more company goals and strategy and VC, fundraising and all that. And when you look at those three things, they all are value creators in different ways. But I think revenue ops is the one that will always take the first, you're the revenue generator. That's what people want, right? Because they pay for the rest. You pay for the rest of the company, right? But it's not to dice anybody. It is very important to have business ops sorted. It is very important to have product and engineering operations. And I think all of them can create value. But to your point, revenue ops is always going to be number one, right?
And so if we talk about the different stages, because you mentioned it really quickly, and we talked about it last time, for example, at the beginning, mostly people are going to use spreadsheets, even if it's maybe not the best case scenario here. Again, from seed, series A, B, C, D, what are the different stages that you don't want to miss when you're actually building around the RevOps? And again, you mentioned it with your husband. I mean, some companies, they are starting from scratch, even if they are quite big. So I guess best practice is pretty important here.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I'm working on an idea myself on, how to help early stage startup have kind of a basic operational infrastructure, which obviously revenue ops is a big part of. And talking to different founders and co-founders, this is something I've got great quotes about that, where it's like, I don't have the time, I don't have the money, what do we start with? I didn't know where to start, all those kind of things. And I think it's dependent also on your business model, right? I think it's different if you're very B2B, very B2C, B2B2C, and then move over to biotech and all that. Everybody has a very different business model. But at the end of the day, I'm trying to be as specific as I can be in terms of answering your question. So please stop me if I'm not. It's around looking at a customer or as a deal or a transaction, right? And I don't know if that's going to make sense, but when you're early on, people will have a tendency to say, okay, because we need to generate demand, we have to go and buy all those tools and 6 Sense and you name it, right? Like all these other things. And I think people are really hoping those tools will be the silver bullet, right? It's like, okay, I don't know how to generate demand, or, that's not my forte, which is fair, right? Not all of us are business development people. So they're very, very attracted to the shiny tool and toy and let's do that. But I don't think that's where, when you're at early stage, that's how you build the foundation, right? I think the foundation is going back to basics. And I know it's not as sexy as like, hey, let's go get AI and all that kind of stuff. But I think the basics of being able to take a prospect and make sure that you can walk them through their entire life cycle, right? Through your team or even yourself, right? You're taking a prospect, you're talking to them and you're going through the sales process, and then you're able to, okay, how do we onboard them? How do I support them? And then I renew. Just that basic and providing the best customer experience, I think at the beginning is way more important than figure out all the shiny tools that you need. So I wouldn't do spreadsheet. I mean, but it's really hard for me to say or not say, don't go get a CRM either, right? Because everybody's going to be like, oh, Salesforce, right? The obvious one, Dynamic, Salesforce, Pipedrive, you name it, right? The problem with those is not all of them, but some of them are extremely expensive when you're early stage, right? They have so many bells and whistles that you won't use until you're series A, B, or C, right? Like it's just, hey, I just want to see where I'm at with my customers, right? I just want to track them. And so do you really go and, buy such expensive tool? A lot of companies do it. A lot of startups do it. They are the best on the market right now, whether you love them or hate them. They still control the market. So, you've seen people now moving away from those at early stage and use tools Notion, Monday.com, some of those other, templates. For me, and again, stop me, task management, and they have all these crowdsourced templates, right? Which people like. It's cheaper, right? It is cheaper per user. So, but they don't provide you with best practices, right? You still have to figure out, you still have to build it, right? If there's no template. So it's really hard to kind of like, actually, I don't wish for any of you founders that kind of struggle of like, how do I know what to build? What do I buy? Where do I find this information? How do I do it quickly? Because I want to be focused on sales and product, right? And I don't think there's something, to be honest, on the market that's fitted for early stage startups today. I don't think there is. I think there's a lot of really big, robust solutions out there that are expensive, and then there's non-robust, kind of a not Band-Aid, but better than Excel, right? Because you don't have to do spreadsheets. And then there's a gap for startups, and maybe I'll fill the gap. I don't know. That would be great. But it's just I think I wouldn't. Again, being a Salesforce baby in a way, because I've been in the ecosystem for 15 years, I would start there first and try to see if I can survive with the essentials and make sure that I'm not on spreadsheet. But yeah, I mean,
yeah, we don't really have the choice, definitely.
You don't,
because that eventually you're going to buy them. I mean, and
so a lot of people just, hey, I'm just gonna go for it, and I'm gonna be mindful. And it's it's a great product. Don't get me wrong. I mean, like I said, 15 years. It's a great product, but it's not, at this point, it's not as fitted for early stage, right? I think so.
And so as the more you grow, the more you're going to add tool. Okay, Salesforce is the CRM, fine, but then you need engagement tools. You need maybe another system of records for all the things. And then I guess that at some point, and I know that it creates also silos within the teams, because not everybody is an expert on specific topics and so on. So, and you also need to aggregate data, because you need revenue data also at some point. How does it fit inside the stack and the process? Again, you need data, but you need teams to build everything.
Yeah, again, I think I was looking at the enterprise sales stack. I don't know if there's a kind of a diagram that comes almost every year, every few years gets updated and shows all the providers out there for enterprise, sales. And to your point, you have CRM, and then you have RFP and CPQ, and, all the things that they consider enterprise sales stack. And I was looking at that one from, I think, late 22, a new one came out, and it's astonishing the number of tools that are out there. Like, I don't know. Some of them I don't even know. You're just like, is it really an enterprise tool? I've never heard of it. Like, who uses it? My guess, very industry specific, right? So if you're not in the industry, you're not going to know, or anything regional, maybe regional also focused. I think one of the things that's actually breaking the customer experience as well as the process internally is the fact that no CRM out there fulfills the entire revenue ops lifecycle. Right? I mean, if you talk about, again, not that I'm picking on them, but, if you look at Salesforce, it's marketing, sales, and service. There is no customer success cloud. There is no professional services cloud, right? You have to go with Financial Force, which is built on Force.com, or you got to go to Gainsight or Pendo.io or any of those, right? So when you look at it, even internally, for you to manage your customer, some of the CRMs out there don't really fulfill all the stages when you think about it. And so that creates, to your point, silos. So it's, how do you break those, and how do you bring in the bare minimum tools that you need? I think that's really, that would be my recommendation, right? Like, spend time just thinking through, if I move my customer through the process, what do I really need in day one? Do I need a full marketing cloud, or do I just need mass emailing, basic lead nurturing, and lead scoring? And even that, somebody could tell me, like, maybe pre-seed, seed, what am I going to do? Lead scoring. Totally fair. I'm thinking a bit further down, but just the basic of engagement, right, on that front, and getting that demand coming in, and then moving them through the pipe, and then for, closing the deal, to how do I onboard them, like just that. and finding those minimal, tools. I think that's the most important, like taking some time to decide how that's going to work versus just buying randomly. I think that's actually worth people's time to really just thinking through it and say, okay, I think this is my end to end and this is where things are going to fit. And that's all I need for now.
Okay, that's interesting. Because maybe if we talk about best practices and in a way system engineering, because that's mostly what it is, what would be the free advice that you would share to somebody like you, but maybe 5 or 10 years ago that would really have helped you, because then at some point it's if I'm in my shoes, what would I do?
5 or 10 years ago.
Or maybe 5.
No, I'm just trying to see where it was, 5 versus 10. You know what? I think, to be honest, if I had known a bit more about the startup world, maybe I would have entered it faster. And that's just, more lessons learned on realizing I like building stuff. So, I think that would be number one. And I think, it's easier to do it when you're younger too, right? Taking a risk, and then you're a sponge, I love learning and I'm constantly learning, but I think at that age you can learn even more. It's about like when you're a kid and you learn a language, right? From zero, It's easier than now. So I would think that, that would be number one. I would have done that sooner rather than later. No regrets, just, I think I would just jumped right in if I had known. Or somebody would have told me. I think that more on the revenue ops concept, I think it's funny when I first fell into that world of customer strat and operations, I think a lot of people would look at it as process system data, not as much as customer journey people, teams, and how you build that, that customer facing team from, end to end. And I think I would have wanted to know, to bring that to bear in some of my projects, at PwC, maybe more than, hey, we got to think about the process and we got to, you know what I mean? Like that old, less customer centric, maybe, if that makes sense. I think that was a big one that I had to learn along the way. And then, and I think third one, it's not really, it's going to be an obvious one, but I'm going to, I think it's constant, the change, right? The rate of change and the rate of things being named and renamed. And don't be afraid of it, because, it doesn't really matter what it's named at the end of the day. It's about the expertise that you have or the experience that you have, right? And that you've built along the way. I think we had talked about that, right? When I started, it was marketing ops, sales ops. Then a few years later, it was commercial operations. That was the new term. And people are like, commercial, is it marketing and sales? And that's what it was, or was it post? And now we're at revenue ops. So my guess is we're going to come up with something else in a few years. We might go back to the silos. I don't know. We might go, forward with something else, customer. I don't know. And I think, people are focused on that. And it's more about, don't, forget the labels, just build your expertise, learn, and then, you'll find your spot, and, it's fine. It doesn't matter what it's called. You know what I mean?
Like, you just have to adapt at some point.
Right. Definitely. Exactly.
Maybe as a final note, because I know that we talked about, I think it's a really interesting topic on sales efficiency, regarding the traditional model where you just say, okay, I need more revenue, I'm going to add more sales reps. And we also, what happened in the recent year, I was going to say years, but it's actually in the recent year, it's not really working anymore. And I guess that also RevOps does have an impact on this, because you're also looking at productivity, efficiency. What's your take on this?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think it addresses one of the things I haven't touched enough in the previous question, which is data, right? I think in terms of, revenue generation is is a bit, 50% art and 50% science, to be very honest, right? I think, there's a balance
People
there.
and data. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Right. And so again, some people would say, well, Elisabeth, it's 75-25. Okay, I'm not going to, fight on the percentage. I think people have different ideas on that. But yeah, I think, with what we're seeing in the last year or so, I think, previously was growth at any cost. And so let's throw people at it, right? Let's go find really good sales reps and land and expand, right? We're just going to throw people, go sell a few licenses here and there. And then when you're lending the account, just expand from there. Again, some companies have been extremely successful in doing that. The problem is it's not just the cost of the people, right? And I mean, cost of sales, right? There's also ramping them up, right? So to get them to productivity. So from an enablement, from a yield, from an everything like that, it's actually way more than just the cost of one sales resource, to be very honest. And I think people are now like, okay, can I make a better use of my money? And can I do both in the sense of maybe reduce the number of sales reps, but I get them more productive by providing them more insights on the ICP or better targeted marketing, or, you know what I mean? Like, I think there's a lot of things that people are looking at versus just like, oh, I have a higher number, so let me go hire more reps. I mean, no matter what, there's only so much a person can do. So if you're trying to double revenue, you can't just expect people to double their targets, right? That's just not, you will have to add a few people, but it's just, I think the old model of, that's where you're playing with your assumptions, right? Where you're like, okay, my assumptions that used to be X 2 years ago, now this year, with what we need and what our investors might be looking at, I might have to change those assumptions, but then I might have to invest in other things that could be actually cheaper, right? And lower our cost of sale to do that. And to be honest, the big thing that we're seeing this year is a lot of focus on upsell and, renewal and upsell, right? From a CAC perspective. So a lot of the companies are sitting with their teams and saying, okay, how do I expand at accounts we've already landed, right? It's cheaper for us to chase those opportunities than chasing new customers. And I think, that's one of the things that a lot of startups are, or even companies are looking at in terms of being more efficient and being more productive versus just adding reps and getting net new accounts, right? Net new customers. So I think that's one. And I think, the second piece is going to be that balance again of, scientifically figure out what's working well, what's not working well through the data and say, hey, let's not go chase anything or everything, but let's really chase things where, we're seeing our conversion rates like through the roof, right? If you have anything, through the roof, meaning, not the best conversion rate, but you can only do that with data, to your point, right? And so you got to track that data somewhere. And I'm going to tie it back, right, to what you were saying on best practices, right? And what would you do? I think that's where operations and RevOps becomes really the value creator, is that a lot of early stage startups don't always think about, hey, I don't have the time, nor the knowledge, nor the money to do this. Yeah, but guess what? In this kind of economy, you might have to forfeit a bit of the money you were going to spend with a sales team or product to have that, so you can get the data you need to actually be able to find those trends of saying, hey, you know what, now I have the data, so it's easier for me to say, let's go after this or let's go after that, and be more productive and efficient from a sales perspective. But you can't do that on spreadsheet or on Notion or on, whatever other tools out there, right? You just can't. It's harder. It's not impossible, but it's harder, right? So it's, how do you build that minimum viable process and those minimum pieces of information, right? Data you need to be able to your point, bring Captain Data and just bring all this more easily and then provide insights, right? I think that's
for
the
example.
big... Huh? I'm sorry, what did you say?
That's one part of the job, definitely. But yeah, you need data at some point to take decisions. And if you don't take a look at the data, it's going to be so much harder. Anyway, on any topic, actually.
Any topic. Fair. Yeah.
Thank you so much. It was really interesting. Maybe as a closing point, because I'm a bit curious about your interest in the mission 15 tech. If you could just give us a quick statement on this.
Yeah, so I don't know how much you know about 15 Tech. It's actually a French-based company led by Caroline Ramad. She's also part of FrenchFounders, and that's how I met her. And so her mission is to bring parity in tech. Women like bring 50%, or she would like to aim for 50% of women in tech in the future.
Big number.
It's a big number, yeah. So bring that parity. And it's not just on the business function. It's even specifically and actually on the engineering and product management and all that. So really, not just on the business side and what you hear from other organizations around board and leadership. Yeah. It's also just there are really great women talent from a software development perspective, from a product management, from a designer, all those kind of things. So she's looking for really helping bring that parity up. I met Caroline. She's actually an amazing leader, amazing woman. She has a wonderful journey. She worked at La Mairie de Paris. I mean, it's kind of like crazy, her background. And we hit it off doing a customer, kind of a session for FrenchFounders. And then what happened is that end of last year, she asked me if I wanted to invest in the company, and I did say yes. And so, I'm totally supportive. I've, helping her as she need to, if there's anything that I can do. But I think it's a wonderful, it's a wonderful mission. It's going to be a big journey, and it's something I grew up in a male-oriented industry. I mean, I did engineering, right?
Yeah.
So I was. I did Terminal S in France, so I was already 25-30% of us were female, right, women, or I guess teenager at the time in high school, and you don't realize, right? You're so used to be in that environment that you don't realize that you're one of the few, and you grew up with wonderful, actually, I've been very lucky, wonderful guy friends and that community that helped me out. And then I didn't realize as much that there was a problem until later, actually, in my career, where you start getting higher up and you're like, oh crap, this is not sufficient. Like I was lucky enough to grow up in that environment and I didn't have any issues, but I'm not the poster, no, there's plenty of other issues out there. So in tech, I think that's something that's extremely important, just to bring that diversity, right? To
totally.
coding, to ideas, to you name it, right? I think it's just it's bringing diversity and perspective. And I think we can only get better at that. And I know there's been wonderful men out there, allies. And so we thank them and we hope to get more with them, and just, so that's pretty much that. But I encourage anybody to go check them out. It's a great mission. It's a great thing that they're doing, and hopefully, they'll be extremely successful. So.
Excellent. Well, that's a perfect wrap up. Thank you so much again, Elisabeth, and have a great one, and maybe see you soon.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks for having me. Have a good one. Bye.
Thanks.